Then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that.
That really happened. Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in the East. I apologize for making you relive that. But at this moment in our politics, it's important to remember exactly what we all went through the last time he was president. The suffering, the many, many investigations into him and his own conduct, the damage done to our institutions, the eroding of democracy, that history attempting to be whitewashed this week by the GOP at the Republican National Convention, as the New York Times opinion writes, quote, "This week, Republicans have tried to rewrite the 4 years of Trump's presidency as a time of unparalleled peace, prosperity, and tranquility. But under his leadership, the country lurched from one crisis to the next, from the migrant families separated at the border to the sudden spike in prices caused by his trade war with China, to the reckless mismanagement of the COVID pandemic. And he showed over and over and over how little respect he has for the Constitution and those who take an oath to defend it. And what lies ahead, if Trump should prevail in November, will be much, much worse, according to him. We know this. He has told us it's on paper this time. Donald Trump has openly talked about implementing the largest deportation in American history, stacking federal agencies with an army of his loyal disciples, going after and pursuing and prosecuting his enemies using the levers of the federal government, withdrawing the country from our global alliances, things like NATO. It would mean an end to the America we know and love. We cannot lose sight of that as the ex-president projects whatever he projects this week and formally accepts the Republican nomination again tonight. It caps off a multi-day event that has presented a choice before all of us, before the American people. It's not grounded in truth or reality. There is not a lot of toned-down rhetoric that they promised would come following the tragic attempted assassination over the weekend. The Daily Show points that out.
Word on the street was that the RNC speeches were going to be civil and polite now. So, bring on the good vibes.
The Democrats' disastrous record on crime, trade, and regulation has ruined the lives of countless Minnesotans.
Your family is less safe.
Biden's violent crime crisis.
Our children are dying.
War on families.
Woke indoctrination
trampled underfoot by the radical left.
Biden and the Democrats are doing everything they can to tear down this great country.
America cannot afford 4 more years of a weekend at Bernie's presidency.
Kumbaya, my lord. Kumbaya. I mean, I guess this is toning it down. And for the record, it is totally unfair to compare Joe Biden's presidency to Weekend at Bernie's, okay? For one thing, Bernie could pass as an alive person, okay? Also, that movie got a sequel.
A perilous moment for American democracy that would be funny if it wasn't so scary. One candidate, our current president, sick with COVID, has called from his own party to step aside or ratcheting up because the threat from the other, the wannabe autocrat, is too great, too vast. It's where we start the hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. In Milwaukee at the convention, staff writer for The Atlantic, Tim Alberta, is here. Plus, political strategist, MSNBC senior analyst Matthew Dowd is here with us in New York. Former RNC spokesperson, host of the Bulwark podcast, Tim Miller. Tim Alberta, you have written some pieces that, when the history of these times are told, will be in there, starting with your Susie Wiles, Chris LaCivita reporting, and then your J.D. Vance reporting, and your other dispatches from the convention. So congratulations to you. Let's work backward, though. Take me inside this moment as we await what has been described as a somewhat changed Donald Trump.
Well, thank you, Nicole, first for saying that. It's very kind of you. Look, I think the degree to which Donald Trump has changed, has been transformed by this near assassination just a few days ago, we'll really get a glimpse at it tonight. And, you know, I have covered scores and scores of Trump's speeches around the country. I have traveled with his campaign at length over the last 8 years. I've seen him in a lot of different venues, in a lot of different moods, striking a lot of different tones. I've never heard a tone of humility, of reconciliation. I've never heard a tone of genuine reflection. And according to some people who are close to him and who have spoken with him since the events of last Saturday, they have heard traces of that. They have heard hints of that. And I think they are genuinely curious, as are the rest of us, whether that will come through tonight in prime time as the nation waits to hear from the former president for the first time since he was nearly killed. But Nicole, if past is at all prologue, I don't know that we should expect a dramatically different version of Donald Trump tonight. If we see one, then obviously that scrambles sort of everything we know about this campaign, this election, and even potentially the future of the country. But I think to say that we should expect that would be putting the cart way ahead of the horse.
Yeah, a cart that's never been spotted on the planet before. Tim Alberta, your reporting is so important and revealing about how they see the race. And you're reporting, the line that sort of kept me up all night the day that I read it, was that they are, in their view, what they're seeing is a landslide victory for Donald Trump. I wonder if you can sort of explain then the selection of J.D. Vance, and that landslide is predicated on running against Donald Trump, or running against Joe Biden, based on in your story and your reporting. What happens to all those predictions and assumptions, and even the J.D. Vance pick, if that ends up not being who they face in November?
Sure, Nicole, I'll take the first part and just emphasize that the J.D. Vance selection is the clearest indicator of the Trump campaign's confidence that they're not only winning this race, but that they are running away with this race. They believe that they are headed towards a blowout in November. And the J.D. Vance pick, as one person close to the president described it, he said, look, the revolution is on, right? That's the only proper interpretation of taking a guy like J.D. Vance, who has some baggage and who's not necessarily the person that you would select if you're worried about appealing to the suburban moms outside of Milwaukee and Detroit and Philly and Phoenix and elsewhere. But J.D. Vance does share at some core visceral level the sort of raw, visceral populism that Donald Trump has been successful in selling to the masses, and Trump sees in him an heir apparent to the MAGA empire here. However, it's clear that he would not have necessarily made this selection if we were in a really tight race. But the Trump campaign, from all of its modeling, all of the polling that they've done, they believe that the race is already effectively over. Now, if that's the case, if they have created a situation where by midsummer that they have already buried their general election opponent in Joe Biden, then of course they don't want to see the Democrats change horses. In fact, Nicole, what I reported from Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita after spending months with them is that this campaign, this Trump campaign, more than any other that I've covered, is very specifically engineered to run a very specific race against a very specific opponent in Joe Biden. And at this point, the Trump people are basically just praying that he doesn't leave the race, because if he does, and if they have to go back to the drawing board, it would force them to have to fundamentally recalibrate everything they've done, from the micro-targeting, the modeling, the money that they're spending, where they're spending it, the digital campaign that they're running. Everything that they have optimized in this campaign to date has been meant to defeat not a generic Democrat, but Joe Biden. And so they do not want to see him step aside.
I mean, Matt Dowd, the revolution is on in the room. And for all the critiques of President Joe Biden being in some sort of bubble, I mean, I understand the confident read, and I actually appreciate the confident posture, having worked on campaigns myself. But the reality doesn't really match that. I mean, the race is fluid. The point in the calendar isn't really, measure for your gold toilet done. Nothing's done. There's no fat lady singing. There's a lot of politics left to be played. And I wonder how much the public projection of strength and what Tim Alberta has been able to report may actually factor in, either consciously or subconsciously, to the very serious sort of pro-democracy alarm bells going off in the Democratic coalition?
Well, I think you've raised all valid points, and let me just second Tim Alberta and what he's done, being a fellow Michigander, and all the work he's done. Bravo to him and everything he's done in the course of the last few years. You know, to me, this exuberance about whether or not they're going to win and by how much in a landslide, it made me think, do they think Joe Biden won in a landslide in 2020? Because they're not going to win by 7 million votes, popular votes. It's just not going to happen possibly. And they're saying they're going to take all the states back. So basically what they're telling us is Joe Biden won in a landslide in 2020, and they think they're going to repeat that this time. This race is still so fluid, though there are some parameters of it very set. I don't think this convention this week's going to move a single voter. I don't think it's going to cause any bump. But the last 2 or 3, 4 conventions that have been held back to 2012 haven't really moved anybody in the course of this. The only time people get moved if there's a surprise or something major happens in the course of the convention. That didn't happen with the J.D. Vance pick. It was just ho-hum. Okay, here we go, another sycophant added on the ticket. What I think should worry the Trump campaign is, since the debate, they have basically had 21 or 22 straight positive days for themselves. They've had 21 or 22 positive straight days, and that's allowed them to stretch a lead to 2 or 3 points. That should be concerning to them about their candidate, and that should be concerning to them about their policies and their vision and what they're offering to the American public. Because in the course of a campaign in the summer, when you have 21 or 22 straight days that are beneficial to you and negative to the opposition, and you're only able to move the needle by 2 or 3 points in the course of the race, shows, one, this race is going to be close, though I do think Trump has an advantage today, especially electoral college wise. But this race is never going to stretch past the 3 or 4 point margin scale. It's just not, with the way things are polarized, with how Democrats are lined up, it's never going to be beyond 3 or 4 points. And a 3 or 4 point victory in a polarized environment is a significant victory.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.